They threw wine on my white dress and called me trash. The elite women laughed as security dragged me toward the exit. But when that one man recognized me and made the call, everything changed. My husband's voice on that speaker made the entire room freeze in terror. What you're about to hear will make your blood boil and then give you the most satisfying ending ever. If you love stories where karma hits hard, smash that subscribe button now because this revenge is absolutely legendary. Let me tell you how I went from humiliated to victorious in one unforgettable night. My name is Dorothy and I want to tell you about the night that changed everything. It was a Saturday evening in Manhattan and I was getting ready for the annual Children's Hope Charity Gala. Now, you might think that as the wife of one of the richest men in America, I'd be draped in diamonds and designer gowns, but that's never been who I am. I stood in front of my mirror, smoothing down my simple white dress. It was elegant, but understated, something I'd picked up from a regular department store. My jewelry was minimal, just my wedding ring and a small pair of pearl earrings my grandmother left me. My husband always tells me I look beautiful, no matter what I wear. But tonight felt different. Tonight I was going alone. You see, my husband had an emergency business meeting in Chicago. He'd tried to cancel it, but billions of dollars were at stake and hundreds of jobs depended on his decision. So, he kissed me goodbye that morning and made me promise I'd still attend the gala. Someone needs to represent our family, he said. And nobody does it better than you. The valet outside the Grand Plaza Hotel looked at me like I was lost. When I handed him my invitation, he actually examined it twice, flipping it over as if checking for authenticity. "This is for the Children's Hope Gala," he said slowly like I couldn't read. "Yes, I know," I replied with a smile. "That's where I'm going." He reluctantly stepped aside, but I could feel his judgmental eyes following me as I walked through those golden doors. The ballroom was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers, casting rainbow patterns across marble floors, tables draped in cream silk, and flowers that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. But what struck me most was the sea of designer gowns. Everywhere I looked, women glittered like expensive ornaments. Their diamonds caught the light with every movement, their dresses flowing like liquid gold and silver. And here I was in my simple white dress from Macy's. I took a deep breath and reminded myself why I was here. This wasn't about fashion or showing off wealth. This was about raising money for children who had nothing. Children I'd spent the last 5 years helping through my foundation. Children whose faces I could see clearly in my mind. Whose stories had changed my heart forever. The first hour passed quietly. I moved through the crowd, listening to conversations, observing the energy of the room. I noticed how the staff barely acknowledged me. Waiters would approach with champagne trays, see me, and then veer away toward women in more expensive attire. It was subtle, but it was there. I was standing near the silent auction display when I first heard the whispers. 3 women had positioned themselves just close enough that their voices would carry. "Look at her," one of them said, not bothering to lower her voice much. "Did she get lost from the kitchen staff? That dress can't be more than $200, another added with a laugh. "At a $5,000 a plate dinner, how embarrassing." I felt my cheeks flush, but I kept my composure. I'd learned long ago that dignity was something nobody could take from you. You had to give it away. And I wasn't about to give mine away to strangers who judged worth by price tags. But they weren't finished. The leader of their little group, a tall woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a dress that probably cost more than a car, decided to approach me directly. Her name tag read Catherine Morrison, and from the way others deferred to her, she was clearly someone who commanded respect in this social circle. "Excuse me," Catherine said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I don't think we've met. I know everyone who's Anyone at these events, and you're new. I'm Dorothy, I replied simply. Dorothy, she repeated, waiting for a last name. For some recognition to dawn. When it didn't come, her smile grew colder. And, you're here because the same reason as everyone else, I said calmly. To support children in need. Her friends had gathered around now, forming a semicircle that felt more like a trap than a conversation. I could sense other people starting to notice conversations quieting as they turned to watch whatever drama was unfolding. Of course, Catherine said, her tone becoming more condescending with each word. We all want to help the children, but this is a rather exclusive event. The ticket price alone is quite substantial. I hope you didn't put yourself in financial hardship to be here. The implication was clear and it hit exactly where she intended. She was suggesting I couldn't afford to be here. That I was somehow pretending to be something I wasn't. The irony was almost amusing if it weren't so cruel. I can manage, I said quietly. Can you though? One of her friends chimed in. Because, honestly, darling, you look a little out of place. This isn't exactly a casual dinner party. I felt something inside me tighten, but I maintained my calm exterior. I think I'm exactly where I need to be. Catherine's eyes narrowed. She was clearly used to people backing down, apologizing, maybe even leaving. When faced with her social intimidation, my refusal to be cowed seemed to irritate her. Well, she said, reaching for a glass of red wine from a passing server. I suppose everyone has the right to dream above their station. What happened next felt like it unfolded in slow motion. Catherine raised her wine glass, and for a moment, I thought she was going to toast to something. Instead, she accidentally stumbled forward, sending the entire contents of her glass splashing across the front of my white dress. The red wine hit the fabric like blood, spreading quickly across the simple material. Gasps echoed around us as conversation stopped completely. Catherine's hand flew to her mouth in mock horror. Oh my goodness, she exclaimed loudly enough for half the ballroom to hear. I'm so clumsy. Your dress, your your dress. Her friends immediately joined the performance, offering napkins while barely containing their laughter. Don't worry, one of them said in a voice loud enough to carry. I'm sure it wasn't expensive to replace. I stood there, red wine dripping from my dress, feeling the eyes of hundreds of people on me. This was the moment Catherine had orchestrated my public humiliation, my reason to leave in shame. The stain was spreading and there was no hiding it, no graceful way to pretend this hadn't happened. But instead of the embarrassment and retreat Catherine expected, something else happened. I looked down at my stained dress, then back up at her perfectly made UP face. And I smiled. Accidents happen, I said calmly. Thank you for your concern. Catherine's confident expression faltered slightly. This wasn't the reaction she'd wanted. She needed me, broken, apologetic, fleeing. Instead, I stood my ground. Security, Catherine called out, her voice sharp with frustration. Security, we have a situation here. Two large men in black suits appeared quickly. Catherine pointed at me as if I were a criminal. This woman is clearly not supposed to be here, she announced loudly. She's making other guests uncomfortable, and now there's been an incident. I think it's best if she leaves. One of the security guards looked at me sympathetically but moved forward. Anyway, ma'am, if you could come with us. The crowd had formed a circle around us. Now, phones appearing as people started recording what they thought was just another social media moment. I could hear whispers, some sympathetic, others amused. This was entertainment for them. Watching someone get publicly ejected from an exclusive event. There's no need for that. A strong male voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. Everyone turned to see a distinguished older man pushing through the circle of onlookers. I recognized him immediately. William Harrison, a respected businessman whose company had worked With my husband's corporation for years. His face was flushed with what looked like anger. William. Catherine's voice brightened considerably. Thank goodness. Could you help explain to security that this woman doesn't belong here? But William wasn't looking at Catherine. He was looking directly at me, and his expression was one of disbelief and growing fury. Mrs. Dorothy, he said, his voice carrying clearly across the now silent ballroom. I am so sorry. This is absolutely unacceptable. Catherine's confident smile began to waver. William, what are you? William pulled out his phone without taking his eyes off me. Excuse me for just one moment, he said, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. I could see he was making a call, and from the urgency in his movements, it was important. The phone connected, and William's voice carried enough that several people nearby could hear his end of the conversation. You need to get here now, he said into the phone. Right, now they're humiliating your wife. There was a pause. Yes, at the Children's Hope Gala, some woman just threw wine on her and called security to have her removed. Another pause. Trust me, you want to be here for this. The color drained from Catherine's face so quickly, I thought she might faint. Her friends looked confused, glancing between William and me as if trying to solve a puzzle they couldn't quite grasp. William, Catherine said, her voice now uncertain. Who were you calling? William ended the call and looked at Catherine with disgust. I was calling someone who's going to be very interested to hear how his wife was treated tonight. His wife, one of Catherine's friends, whispered. The ballroom had gone completely silent now. Even the music had stopped as words spread that something significant was happening. I could feel hundreds of eyes on us. Cameras recording, the entire social elite of New York waiting to see how this drama would unfold. Catherine was beginning to understand that she'd made a terrible mistake, but she was still trying to maintain control. William, I think there's been some misunderstanding. This woman showed up in a cheap dress, acting like she belonged here. This woman, William said, his voice rising with indignation, has probably donated more money to children's charities than everyone in this room combined. And you just humiliated her because she doesn't feel the need to prove her worth with expensive clothes. The whispers around us were growing louder now, people trying to figure out who I was, how William knew me, what was coming next. I could see the confusion and growing panic in Catherine's eyes as she realized her carefully orchestrated humiliation was backfiring spectacularly. That's when we heard it. The sound that made everyone in the ballroom turn toward the entrance. Heavy footsteps, moving quickly, accompanied by what sounded like a small security detail. The crowd near the doorway parted like the Red Sea. My husband appeared in the entrance of the ballroom, and the effect was immediate. Conversations didn't just quiet, they stopped completely. Even the staff froze in place. Everyone in New York's social circles knew exactly who he was, had seen his face on magazine covers and news broadcasts, and he was clearly furious. His eyes scanned the room until they found mine. In that instant, his expression transformed from anger to concern as he took in my Winstead dress, and the crowd gathered around us. He moved through the ballroom like a man on a mission, people stepping aside without being asked. Dorothy, he said as he reached me, his hands immediately going to my shoulders. Are you hurt? I'm fine, I said softly. Just a little wine on my dress. He turned to look at the crowd around us, his gaze eventually settling on Catherine. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, but carried clearly across the silent ballroom. Would someone like to explain to me what happened to my wife? Catherine looked like she might collapse. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the terror in her eyes as she realized the full magnitude of what she'd done. She'd publicly humiliated one of the most powerful women in America, and now she was face to face with one of the most powerful men. There was an accident, she stammered. I spilled wine. It was just an accident. My husband's voice was flat, emotionless, which somehow made it more intimidating than if he'd been shouting. You accidentally threw wine on my wife and called security to have her removed from an event she helped organize. The gasps from the crowd were audible now. People were putting pieces together, remembering that the Children's Hope Foundation was primarily funded by our family, that this entire gala existed because of our donations. My husband looked around the room, taking in the faces of everyone who had watched this unfold, everyone who had been entertained by what they thought was someone getting their come-up-pants. Then, he walked to the small stage where the evening speakers had been making their presentations. He picked up the microphone and his voice filled every corner of the ballroom. Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Dorothy's husband. A ripple of nervous laughter went through the crowd. I came here tonight because I received a very disturbing phone call. Someone told me that my wife was being humiliated and escorted out of this event. You could have heard a pin drop. Now, I want you all to take a good look at Dorothy. Look at her simple dress, her understated jewelry, her humble appearance. Some of you clearly saw these things and decided she didn't belong here tonight. His eyes found Catherine in the crowd, and she actually took a step backward. What you don't know is why she dresses this way. Dorothy could easily wear gowns that cost more than most people's cars. She could drape herself in diamonds that would blind you, but she chooses not to. Do you know why? The ballroom was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Because 3 years ago, Dorothy visited an orphanage in Guatemala. She met children who were sleeping on dirt floors, children who hadn't eaten in days, children who had never owned a single toy, and she made a promise that night. Every dollar she didn't spend on herself would go to helping children like them. His voice grew stronger, more passionate. The dress she's wearing tonight, she bought it for $49 at a regular store. You know what she did with the money she saved by not buying a designer gown? She bought meals for 300 children in Honduras. The jewelry she didn't buy, that money went to building a school in Kenya. I could see tears in some people's eyes now. Catherine looked like she wanted to disappear. Dorothy's foundation has built 17 schools, funded 32 orphanages, and provided clean water to over 40,000 people. She's done this quietly, without fanfare, without seeking recognition. She measures her worth not by what she owns, but by how many lives she can change. He paused, letting his words sink in. So when I heard that someone had publicly humiliated my wife, had judged her worth by the price of her clothes, had tried to have her thrown out of an event that exists because of her generosity, well, I thought you all deserved to know exactly who you were dealing with. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Then someone in the back of the room started clapping. Others joined in, and within seconds the entire ballroom was erupting in applause. But my husband wasn't finished. There's one more thing, he said, his voice cutting through the applause. Dorothy didn't want me to mention this tonight, but I think it's important. You know, the woman who threw wine on my wife's dress. Her husband's company is currently being considered for a contract worth several $100 million was being considered. Catherine's face went white as the implications sank in. Because character matters, how we treat others when we think nobody important is watching, that tells you everything you need to know about a person. He set the microphone down and walked back to me. The crowd parted again, but this time it was out of respect, not just recognition of power. Ready to go home? He asked me quietly. Actually, I said, surprising myself, I think I'd like to stay for a few more minutes. He smiled, that warm smile I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. Of course you would. What happened next was perhaps the most satisfying part of the entire evening. One by one, people began approaching me. Not Catherine and her friends. They had somehow vanished into the crowd, but others, people who had witnessed what happened, who had maybe even been complicit in their silence, who now wanted to make amends. They apologized. They thanked me for my foundation's work. They asked how they could help, how they could contribute. The conversation shifted from social gossip to real talk about making a difference in the world. A young woman, probably in her 20s, approached with tears in her eyes. My sister was in one of the schools your foundation built in Guatemala, she said. She's the first person in our family to learn to read. Thank you. An older gentleman pressed a business card into my hand. I run a logistics company, he said. Whatever your foundation needs moved anywhere in the world, no charge. It's the least I can do. By the end of the evening, my foundation had received promises of over $2 million in new donations. But more than that, we'd gained partners, people who were inspired to join our mission, rather than just write checks. As we finally prepared to leave, William approached us one more time. I'm sorry that happened to you tonight, he said to me, but I'm not sorry. Everyone got to see who you really are. My husband put his arm around me, being careful not to touch the wine stain that had started this whole thing. You know what the funny thing is? I said to both of them. I actually feel sorry for Catherine. They both looked at me in surprise. She spent so much energy tonight trying to prove she was better than me, trying to make me feel small, but the only person she diminished was herself. She could have spent that time learning about our work, maybe even finding ways to help. Instead, she chose cruelty over curiosity, judgment over generosity. My husband squeezed my shoulder. This is why I love you, he said, as we walked out of that ballroom, past the same valet who had questioned my invitation earlier. I reflected on the evening. Yes, I'd been humiliated. Yes, it had been painful and embarrassing, but it had also been revealing. It showed me who my real friends were, people like William, who stood up for what was right, even when it was uncomfortable. It showed me that there were still good people in the world, people who were moved to action when they saw injustice. Most importantly, it reminded me why I do the work I do. It's not for recognition or praise. It's because somewhere in the world there's a child sleeping on a dirt floor who deserves better. And if wearing a $49 dress means I can help one more child sleep safely, then I'll wear it with pride. The wine stain never did come out of that white dress, but I kept it anyway, hanging in my closet as a reminder of the night when being underestimated became my greatest strength. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be diminished by small-minded people. Sometimes dignity is the